Stories about growing up in St. Louis. That's next on City Corner. Hi, I'm Steve Potter. Welcome to City Corner. Jim Merkel has written a book, Growing Up St. Louis, looking back through the decades, and we welcome Jim to the program now. Hi, Jim. How are you?
Very fine.
Do you remember me?
Oh yeah, I remember you. This is the sixth time, I think.
It's been a while since I've seen you.
Okay. Yeah, it has been. Been a while since you've seen anybody.
Yeah, I know. Things are kind of crazy now, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Let's go back just a bit because you and I had, your book came out earlier this year. And in fact, I had you booked on this program, and then the whole coronavirus thing started and all the rules changed and we had to put everything on hold. So I was actually going to be part of your book launch. Whatever happened with that?
Well, it was canceled. That was going to be down at the library, the Central Library downtown. It was part of our. I had been allowed to interview people at 4 different library branches, but they said, well, if you do that, you'll have to have your launch at the Central Library, and we were going to have different people from the book, and it was all canceled, and we've just been, I was on another thing with Zoom for the St. Charles Library a couple of weeks ago. I'm having some others, but not the same.
Yeah, I was going to be there. I was going to introduce you and introduce a couple of people that are featured in your book. But anyway, you got the book out anyway, right?
Oh yeah, we did. It's just typical great work, Reedy Press work, and very pleased. And people who have read it say they really love it. So we're looking forward to some great things eventually when the stores get open.
Well, Jim, when did the idea for this book come to you first, and why did it enter your brain to do this?
I suspect it was Studs Terkel's, his books about where he interviewed people. Of course, with him, it was a little bit different. He's very political, talking about the 30s and stuff like that. And mine, although I do have some political things, I have just more ordinary things, just ordinary people, as ordinary as they can get. So I set out to interview more than 100 people, and actually born in 1907 to born in 2008, and so we had a real variety from like Frank Cusimano, the sports guy, down to a couple of homeless people who walked into one of my interview sessions, and they had interesting stories too.
Wow, no kidding. That's interesting. Yeah. Of course, I guess you're interested in stories about growing up in St. Louis. You and I have talked many times before, because you certainly grew up here, and I can't remember the entire story, but I think you're from South St. Louis, and a couple of generations at least, right?
Well, I'm actually my earliest people came in 1858, and we have actually a screwy generation. I keep on coming up with things from that era, just showing how strange they were. But I was born in 1951, and we moved. Well, we moved back to St. Louis very soon after that, and we moved when I was 5 to De Pere, right where it's so crowded, but it was country back then. It was west of where 270 is on Manchester. And fascinating things there. Used to have a little thing where there was a barbed wire fence with electricity at the top just to keep out horses. But when you're 5 years old, it doesn't mean anything just to go in there. And it was just such wonderful time in country. And it was, but in 20 minutes or so, you'd be in Webster Groves, where my dad had his business. Mm-hmm. Well, then I moved to Webster Groves, and went to went to Webster and I went to Plymouth, and but I had some wonderful things. And I guess my thing was I came, even then I knew, but I really get the impression that who we are today is so dependent on who we were as kids, and that depends whether you're black, white, rich, or poor. It just sets you for life, for good or bad.
Uh-huh. So you sought out stories from people about their early years.
Well,
And
my big thing was I kept a spreadsheet of just to make sure that there were so many from this decade all the way back to 1900, from this decade, and so many women and so many blacks. Because if you're not intentional, you'll wind up with, say, 85 men and 15 women, which is, you don't want to do that. So you thought, uh-oh, I can't interview any men, so I've got to interview women, and I've got to interview blacks, and so, but beyond that, I did not know what I was going to find when I interviewed people.
yeah, you weren't necessarily looking for some wild, crazy stories, right? You were looking for maybe just sort of everyday tales of growing up.
Well, yeah, everyday tales. I got a fun story with with somebody who talked about how she didn't want to go to school, and her stomach was hurting. Her stomach was hurting, and finally, after about 2 or 3 days of going to school, they called her mother, and her mother came, and somehow she felt like she was going to explode, and then all of a sudden something went pop, and she felt fine. And the mother came and she says, "Oh, I want to stay at school." And that's little things are all, I had another thing where somebody in school, in high school, took a trip with his class to the arch while it was being built, and then they went to the old cathedral. And he said, one of my friends, or maybe he wasn't a friend, he described how he just took his squirt gun and stuck it into the holy water and just, took some out. And that's the kind of jerks, that you always deal with when you're in school. And, so it's not nostalgia. Nostalgia is the happy things about how people went on the Admiral when, frankly, most people didn't go except a day a year. But this is how people live their lives.
Well, the book is Growing Up. The book is Growing Up St. Louis from Reedy Press, and we're going to share some images from the book, Jim. And I just want you to sort of tell the stories behind it.
Sure.
The first one we want to share with people is, I believe, Dorothy Hunter is the name I have here, but it's a picture of 3 young people. What's this about?
Okay, Dorothy. This is 3800 block of Connecticut Avenue, Connecticut Street. This is south of Tower Grove Park, and a little bit west, a couple blocks west of Grand. And Dorothy Hunter is to the left, and she is with a couple of her siblings. And I interviewed her when she was 109 out in Baldwin, I think it was it was an assisted living facility, if you can imagine that. And she was not super okay, but she was okay. She was sharp enough. And I interviewed her, and they talked about how, and imagine this, today, 3 years ago, I interviewed this woman, and she talked about how she went to Union Station to watch her uncle go off to the Great War. And she had, and her father was very stern. He says, no chewing gum. But the uncle just said, here. They gave chewing gums to all the kids that were there, and so the parent was stuck, and the dad was stuck, and so, but it was just tight. She talked about writing the the streetcar and stuff like that. All kinds of interesting stuff. And I wish I would have asked her about the great, about the flu epidemic they had. I'm sure she would have had it, but I guess I can't go there.
That sure would tie into what we're experiencing today, wouldn't it?
Oh, sure, exactly. So,
Hey,
no.
before we get to our break, I want to squeeze another one in. The next one we have, here's a picture of a young girl in a cute little coat and hat. Who's she?
Okay, that's Elizabeth Harper. She was the grand. She lived close to St. Louis University High School, and she talked about how rough it was during the Depression. She said that one time she needed shoes, and so they went downtown to get shoes, and for some reason the shoes were just straight across in the front. She said she hated them, but she said she had to wear it. And she also talked about how when people would come by, saying they were hungry, her mom would make a sandwich for them, and a great story. And she also talked about how a little bit later she went to work at a store at the Woolworth store at Grand and Lindell, and that's where she met her husband to be. And the husband came up and snuck her little things of soda or whatever, and great stories, wonderful story.
And she looks kind of sharp in that little outfit, if you ask me.
And her eyes are really, like piercing,
Jim, we're gonna take a little break, but the book is Growing Up St. Louis, and it's stories from real people about growing up in St. Louis through the decades. Jim Merkel is the author, and we'll be back with more right after this on City Corner.
Here's your check. Oh, you got it. Since I got rid of my car, I really enjoy walking.
Okay. Got it. No.
Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates.
Oh, you're home early.
You live with your mom?
That'll set your game back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Hi. You think you're probably sober?
Yeah.
But you're thinking about taking the back roads home just in case. Why would you do that?
Probably okay isn't okay. Call a cab, a car, or a friend.
Good choice.
Operation Wonder Park is a go!
There's nothing more powerful than imagination. But don't just imagine. Use STEM to change the world.
Who's with me?
Oh, it's gonna hurt tomorrow.
If she can STEM, so can you. Find out more at She Can STEM.
I'm Steve Potter, and welcome back to City Corner. Our guest today is Jim Merkel. His new book is Growing Up St. Louis, Looking Back Through the Decades. And Jim, what you did was you collected stories from a lot of people over time about their experiences, day-to-day experiences, some exciting, some normal, growing up in St. Louis. But before we go with that, as people can tell, our little studio situation here is different because of the epidemic that's been going around and social distancing and all that. And I know you've probably been through a lot like a lot of people, but I just wanted to ask you, what do you think good has come from this experience for everybody? I know there's a lot of frustration, people are isolated. Do you see a small gold lining in it at all?
Well, we're getting to appreciate people. We're getting, I think that for us looking at kids, we can look at them and we realize that they're going to be telling some amazing stories about this. I think that, like I say, we're drawing closer in a lot of ways. Like in my church, we normally get together once a week in smaller groups, and now I'm seeing them on the screen, and I'm really appreciating them and listening to them.
Right. Well, hang in there. Growing Up St. Louis is the book. Let's get back and talk about that, and we have some more images to share and some more stories to tell. Here's a cute little girl, and is her name Florida, or what's the story there?
Florida Cargill. I think somebody in her family was named Florida. So, but she grew up in North St. Louis, and she was in a very wonderful Black community. That really, a lot of times the kids didn't know segregation. They didn't know racism because they were in groups. She says there was restaurants, there was movies, there was banks, everything. And she also went to Douglas Elementary School, which was the segregated school very close to her house. And that was actually for everybody in the county, all the African Americans. And then there was it Douglas? I'm not sure. Anyway, Douglas High School, and she did all the things that they did. She went to choir, and then for about a year, they just got them ready so that they would just not. So they would do impressive things or whatever. And then for her senior year in high school, she went to Webster Groves High School. And there was, of course, she couldn't, unless a person was very light-skinned, you could not get in the choir. And she had other things that she experienced. She said how she would walk to the way that she had to go down Kirkham, and then if people familiar with Webster Groves, to up Gore to Lockwood and then down. If she had to use the restroom, forget it. She just could not use the restroom in those stores, and it was very difficult. And so, but it was a difficult time, for a lot of us.
Yeah. Well, there are some things that are important to remember, aren't there?
Sure.
And things like that, certainly. Let's look at this next one. Here's a lady with an alarm system.
Okay.
That seems relevant today.
Oh, that was Louise Jimerson, the African American, I believe. She was 100 years old when I talked to her. She was very sharp. She was born in 1917, and she talked about growing up in Madison, Illinois. And she talked about having friends, and then thinking that things were okay, and then one day the N-word came out, and she was a little bit nervous about that. She talked about Sunday afternoon meals where they had, of course, after going to church and all of their finery, but they went Sunday afternoon meals and fried chicken, potatoes, all kinds of different food that we would get stuffed. And when I was almost jealous when you think about it. And so, the impression I get out of there is that there was a very wonderful African-American community, African-American culture there. And there's an interesting thing. African-Americans have, it was the grandmother who did the discipline and who just got this little stick, made him go out with a little stick, and it really hurt. And so, but that's the culture. Of course, with me, it was a ping pong paddle, So
hey, Jim, I never disobeyed my grandmother either. I think that's kind of a universal thing. Let's look at this next one. Who's this girl standing in front of the house?
The girl standing in front of the house, that would be Madeline Gaish. And she was, she talked about how she said, well, my father and my mother, they were nice to me, but then the father took up with another woman. And he says, you know how women are. And the way she says, you know how women are. And she said she wanted to have, she didn't want to just live with him. She wanted to be married. And so the father came in and she says, I'm leaving. And it was, of course, hurt all around. And so we really had it really was, and then the mother, all of a sudden, she woke up one morning and the mother was gone and was dead. And she was very young. And so here she was. It looked like she was headed to an orphanage. And back then, orphanages were no fun. And then her uncle found her a very nice and wonderful Italian couple and who adopted them. And the first thing they did, was get her baptized in the Catholic Church. And then she went to St. John's in the Beeville, and she had a very happy time after that. And I talked to her daughter and other people, and so it was a way that it really shows how you really the effect of people reaching out and helping others.
Yeah, that makes all the difference. Who's this young man? His name's James.
His name's James. Oh, the guy with the papers.
Yeah.
Okay, that is Jim Conway, the former mayor.
And, no kidding, yeah.
Yeah, and I knew about him from working for the suburban journals and now MetroSTL.com. He is the father of Steve Conway, who now is the chief of staff for the mayor. And this is a picture of him selling papers, and he was selling papers the morning, right when the papers that said that they had dropped the bomb on Pearl Harbor. And so that was, he talked about how busy there were, and he talked about how if he gathered up, different recyclables, he would get free tickets to movies. So anyway, it's kind of interesting that a man who was mayor back in the 70s had these experiences.
No doubt. Hey, I think we've got time for one more. And this is one that caught my attention, and I really need an explanation on this. Here are some kids on a bike, and the bikes are pointed opposite ways, and there's something in between. And what are these kids up to?
Right. Well, this actually wound up Here, it is one of the people who was in the book. She had a wonderful story about growing up and how in South St. Louis and Shaw, and she's in the middle, of course, and she was, she really loved living in South St. Louis, about where you could get a chicken, and everything, and she could go any place. And she says, no, there was no worry, no terrorists or anything. So right there, it's a great story.
All right, I said one more, but I'm actually going to do one more because here's a surprise turtle. I guess you need to explain this.
The surprise turtle, that's Bert the turtle. And what was really surprised about it, and one of our people told me about it, was that and this was a common thing. I don't remember it, but for people my age, it's they thought, well, they're going to encourage people to do things safe. Like today it's wearing your mask. Then it was getting under your desk so that you survived the bomb. So they had this friendly little Bert the turtle, who they had a little cartoon about it, and he said how when the bomb was going to come, he did it, and of course everybody knew.
I got to stop you there, but I want to let people know this is just the tip of the iceberg. I don't know how many stories you've got in your book, Growing Up St. Louis, but tons of stories from all different kinds of people about their experiences growing up in St. Louis. Now you can get it at Reedy Press, which is www.reedypress.com. And you have a website too. Do you want to plug it real quick?
Okay. Yeah, if you want to get your little signature, it's Jim Merkel, the writer, one word.com.
All right. Jim, it is always a pleasure to talk to you. I have a lot of sympathy for your wife. I can only imagine what she's been putting up with.
Poor lady, yeah.
Jim, thank you so much, and I hope to see you in person one of these days.
Yeah, I do too.
Thank you, Jim.
Sure.
That's Jim Merkel, the writer, Growing Up St. Louis from Reedy Press. I'm Steve Potter. Thanks for watching the show today. Stay safe, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Bye.